If you love a good story, then you have come to the right place. Welcome to Mainly Facts. If you missed some of our videos, this compilation is just what you're looking for. You can watch this when you're bored, you want something in the background, or you just want to pass time. So make sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification button so that next time you can't sleep or just crave some new info, you know where to go. Without further ado, on to the video. What are the strangest house rules you've seen in a person's house? Story 2. My mother-in-law has some major issues. 1. There is a room just as you walk in the house that is completely off limits. It's vacuumed constantly and is a picturesque pink frilly sitting room, pink carpets, etc. Think Dolores Umbridge. My parents brought their dog over once, who is a fantastic chill dog, and she put a paw on the carpet and my mother-in-law almost had an aneurysm. 2. When my husband was growing up, he and his 2 brothers had 1 hour of screen time a day. TV, video games, whatever. 1 hour. 3. 1 bath a week. If you had more than that, you got screamed at. The brothers would end up showering at a friend's house. I had to basically train my husband out of that one. 4. If you had too much fun doing something, they wouldn't let you do it anymore. It made my husband very good at lying and also very obsessive about things he enjoyed. Or if you had too much fun on a weekend, you weren't allowed to do something fun later in the weekend, i.e. visiting a friend's house on Saturday. We weren't allowed to do anything on Sunday except clean or do yard work. 5. Not allowed to argue with parents. Mom has a personality disorder and constantly lies. Dad always backs her up. She will lie about what the boys were doing and say they were breaking a rule when they weren't, and they couldn't argue. This rule is literally pinned to their wall. 6. They have to get the parents cards for birthdays, etc., but the cards are not allowed to be handmade because it's cheap. This rule persists. 7. Have to take pictures every Sunday before going to church in the church outfits. There are hundreds of pictures of this in the same spot in the house. There are other rules I literally can't remember / pick out of the piles of abuse. My husband and his brothers have grown up very well adjusted and sane based on this mess. I cannot fathom being a child in a house like that. The sitting room no one is allowed in is something I've seen once before, and my brain struggles to even understand the kind of person who wants that. It actually upsets me in a way I can't quite pin down. Story 3. My parents, for what it's worth, made me go to bed at 7 p.m. every night from the age of 4 until the age of 16 because I had to share a room with my kid brother. To this day, I also have to go to bed at 10 p.m. when I visit them because I have to walk through their bedroom to get to mine. It's an old house. Another weird rule they have is about bins. Most people have at least a separate bin in the kitchen and their bathroom, right? Maybe a few more all over the house just in case, right? Wrong. My parents keep just one single bin in the center of the kitchen / dining room, and the bin bag is changed once a week at the most. I think they maybe just can't be asked to go around collecting bins, and so this is their god-awful solution. Having a period in that house was a barrel of laughs, let me tell you. From the ripe old age of 11, announcing to the entire house, "Excuse me, coming through, used sanitary pad, ready to go in the bin here, out of the way, dudes." These days, as an adult when I visit, I make a huge deal out of it until they realize how awkward it is and give me a bin for the bathroom. But as a 12-year-old, this was the most embarrassing awkward crap ever. Not to mention when we had guests round, they would be sat in the goddamn dining room and I would be forced to shamefully walk past them into the kitchen, pad in hand, to use the bin. That was some trauma right there, frick. My current house has 2 bins in every room. My best friend's parents did this too. You would think the mom would think about that, especially having a teenage daughter and another that just started her period in the home. Story 13. My cousins always had weird rules about which cups were acceptable to use for which beverages at their house. I cannot tell you how many times I would go to get a cup of water just to have one of them appear out of thin air beside me and scream, "That's a smoothie cup, what are you doing?" Or go to pour myself a cup of milk only to be berated for using a juice cup. I've brought it up to my siblings and apparently it always made them really uncomfortable too. And it's given us all some degree of anxiety about using the kitchen at other people's houses. "Hey, you can't drink water out of that. That's a moon cup." "Listen, it's a cup, and I'll drink whatever I want out of it." "No, seriously, a moon cup is," and he's drinking it. "All right then, but when you're done, I'm gonna need that." Story 16. They all shared a towel after showering. Like one towel for everyone, for 1 or 2 days. When I visited, I asked where the towels were so I could shower after the pool. They looked at me like I had 2 heads. Explained the towel sharing situation because you're clean when you dry off, so it's still clean. Yeah, Mr. Friend's dad, I don't want to dry my face after you've dried your balls on it. A client of mine has 3 full bathrooms in their house for a family of 4. They all showered in the master bathroom. Even the 2 teenagers who have a fully functioning shower next to their bedrooms. It's so weird to me, and it's not because they don't want to clean them. That's my job. I've met people who say that towels are clean because you're clean when you dry off. Folks, I have just so much news to tell you about human skin cells and oils and bathrooms in general. Story 18. I'm a medic, so we go into people's homes every day. We had a cardiac arrest, so we were working as a man, and the wife was having a fit about the mess we were making. Yes, there was some garbage from the pads, needles, meds, but we put all of it into our jump bag. She was screaming at us about it. I told her that her husband was very sick and we were doing everything we could to help. She said she didn't care if he died as long as we didn't make a mess. I wonder what could have possibly made the man so stressed that he had a heart attack. Story 26. Stayed with a neighbor during a family emergency. Estranged grandparent was deathly ill far away, and parents had to make some oh-crap arrangements for childcare. Neighbor had 5 kids. The dad had a 1 tub of water for the family rule. This was in a bathtub with a shower, and when a normal water bill for a large family would be under $40 a month, so I still don't get why. Dad would bathe, then mom, then oldest to youngest. Guests last. The water was cold, dark with muck, and had a greasy film of skin on it by my turn. I was 6 or 7 and tried to refuse, but they shouted at me and I gave in. I gagged the whole time. Seriously, frick you, Mark, you nasty butt swamp water douchebag. Story 27. Went to a friend's house. Well-to-do kind of family, straight-laced, all that crap. Dad came home and started practicing the saxophone in the front room. When I asked a question, my friend told me to shut up and that nobody is allowed to make any noise while Dad practiced saxophone. Just as this short conversation was exchanged, his dad burst through the door and told us all to shut the frick up, because whispering really put him off his saxophone playing. His son/my friend started to cry. His dad played for 3 more hours. We just sat in silence because this was before mobile phones and I couldn't get collected until later that afternoon. I was asked not to tell anyone else at school, but enough people had been and experienced what I'd experienced, so everyone knew not to disturb this kid's dad when he's playing his saxophone. If you have kids, you've made an agreement with the world that you don't get to have hours of silence every day so you can do your hobbies. You can't put a family through that, Dad, and you're kind of pathetic for it. Story 29. She wouldn't actually let us into the house. She threw a housewarming party and we were all excited about attending, but instead she herded us all into her garage and locked us in there. There was a door in the garage that led into the kitchen that she would only unlock if someone wanted the bathroom. She would then escort the person to the toilet and stand outside the door until they were gone, take them back to the garage and lock the door again. The garage was empty as well, not even so much as a deck chair or box to sit on. The guests did not stay long. I left in under an hour and the rest not long after. She was offended after she put so much effort into having us over. You should have said a housewarming party implies we would be in the house. Story 35. Anytime I was over at their house and we would go outside and play, I would have to knock on the door each time to come back in, even if I had been there for a while or if I just walked in with their kid. Their mother kept tabs on exactly how much I ate or drank while I was there and expected me to work for whatever they had given me. I had accidentally left something by the door and I realized after I got a few steps away from their porch, so I just opened the door and reached in to grab it. Her mother grabbed my arm and jerked me back into the house and screamed how I was a guest at their house and that I was to always knock before entering, how I was a rude child. She didn't care that I was just there and what I grabbed was mine, etc. I'd known this woman my entire life. We lived in the same neighborhood. She knew all of my extended family and treated me like I was some stranger. That was my last day playing over there. What's the most naughty thing you've seen happen in a workplace? Story 1. I managed a bar 2 years ago. I had this girl that bartended for me who would go missing on camera all the time. I had them cameras everywhere inside. She'd just disappear for half an hour at a time. I investigated. I was pretty close with a lot of the regulars, small family-owned place in a suburb, and came to find out that she had been, offering intercourse for money. Soliciting intercourse from behind my bar. She was gone shortly thereafter. I couldn't fire her for something that I couldn't prove. I ended up letting her go for neglecting to fulfill her duties as a bartender. She was written up for multiple occasions of leaving the bar customers unattended, and that was enough to get her the hell out. I don't know if that could somehow fall back on me or the bar, but I was not interested in finding out. Story 2. Worked in an emergency room, and I can tell you that a good number of the nurses and paramedics were having affairs and just having rampant intercourse with each other. I remember one specific time walking by a patient room and just hearing intercourse sounds. A few minutes later, a disheveled nurse and firefighter came strolling back to the nurses' station. A different type of naughty, one of the ER physicians was busted for having alcohol in his big gulp while working. Another time, we discovered one nurse in the bathroom half passed out with a needle in her arm. County hospitals are awesome. We had a girl give her boyfriend, who was fully cathed, a handy. His heart rate went up, and when the nurse went in to check on him, she got quite the surprise. Story 3. Work in a hospital ER. Had a patient come in for vaginal pain. Worked her up and positioned her in the stirrup so the doctor could come in and do a quick pelvic exam. Right after I did that, a critical patient came in that required the doc's attention for a while. After about 20 minutes, I went back into the pelvic exam patient's room to apologize for the wait and put the stirrups back down so she could lay normally until the doctor had time to examine her. I walked into her boyfriend on his knees in front of her, eating her out, asked him what the hell he was doing, and he told me he just couldn't resist with her in that position. I escorted him to the waiting room and told security he wasn't allowed back in. Turns out she had chlamydia. Shocker. Story 6. I worked in a cemetery for years. I remember one of the funeral directors was banging a receptionist, and one night she met him out in the wall crypts, and the security guard caught them with my homie's pants down. Naughty and hilarious. Side note, he was engaged to someone else who worked there. The fireworks were legendary. Do tell! He bribed the security guard not to tell, but his girlfriend eventually found out. She wasn't really big on self-esteem and forgave him, but one day the receptionist said good morning to her, and the girlfriend basically told her in the middle of the lobby, "B, don't you ever look at me in my effing eyes or I'll rip yours out." Story 9. This coworker was really into me. I just didn't like her like that, but I guess she got desperate, so she goes to where I'm working in the building, and she literally just flashes her tits in front of me in the middle of the day and walks away. I worked with a chick with big boobs, but everything else about her was meh. Most of the guys were into her, but I wasn't. Had a girlfriend at the time. So she would flash me too, I guess, trying to make me fall under the same spell she had the rest of the guys under. She was weird. Never underestimate the power of indifference, especially around people who derive their self-worth through the validation of others. Story 10. Small company. Had this woman in her 30s working in accounting. Not very attractive, heavy smoker with a voice to match, a bit trashy, but she was funny, friendly, and generally a good person. She found some photos of me online, which I guess she liked. She showed them to the coworkers, I guess for craps and giggles. I walk in, she shows me a printout of one of the photos. The HR lady is standing right next. The unattractive woman says very loudly to me, "Let's have intercourse." HR lady's eyes went, then she just shook her head and walked away defeated. I laughed it off. Didn't have intercourse with her. I'm gonna be that guy. There's no way in hell that would be acceptable if the genders were reversed. I'm gonna be this guy, the mainly facts guy, and say that there's no way that's acceptable with the genders being what they are, or in fact any combination of genders. I don't much like anyone in this story, frankly. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 17. Worked at a place that had a boardroom that overlooked the factory. The boardroom windows were covered in mirror vinyl, and usually it's brighter in the factory than the boardroom, so you can't see it from the factory. After work, it's getting dark, so the lights in the boardroom are brighter than the factory, so the effect is reversed, and you can see everything in the boardroom from the factory, but can't see the factory from inside the boardroom. That's when the CEO walks into the boardroom and F's a receptionist on the boardroom table with a whole bunch of factory workers watching. This is great. Did anyone cheer or clap? Story 30. One of my coworkers loved to wear miniskirts and go commando. I know this because our cubicle desks didn't have vanity panels, and her desk faced mine across an aisle. I didn't spend my time trying to look, mind you, but when she got on her hands and knees one day to check the wiring on her PC, it was hard not to notice. She was also either a natural redhead or very thorough. She knew. What was your "the universe is effing with me" moment? Story 1. Last year, I got hit by a car on my bike and broke my wrist in 3 places. I'm sitting in the hospital bed, and the nurse asked if I wanted to watch TV, so I said sure, and she handed me the remote. The first thing to come on was the Tour de France. I thought, what are the odds, LOL, so I changed the channel. I go to the movie channel, and they're playing Premium Rush, where Joseph Gordon-Levitt gets hit by a car on his bike. I change the channel again, and it's American Ninja Warrior, and the first contestant starts talking about how he wanted to win to prove he was recovered from a biking accident. Eventually, I got so taken aback and frustrated, I just turned it off. 10 minutes later, the doctor comes in to elevate me and goes to shake my broken hand, switches to his left, and says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Armstrong. Nice to meet you." His name was Armstrong. Story 2. Obligatory not me, but my mother-in-law. She claims she is cursed and ends up in the hospital every April 1st without fail. It started when she was a child, and every year something different gets her. A dog mauling her, a car accident, the balcony security rail giving out and making her fall down 3 stories, numerous wounds from other people's April Fool's pranks going wrong, etc. She even has a bunch of scars, and she can tell you which April 1st caused which scar, complete with a full story. One April 1st, we were staying at her place, and she made a pillow bunker in her bedroom and literally waited out the entire day in there. She promised to herself that this would be the first April 1st in decades without a hospital visit. Midnight arrived, and she triumphantly left her pillow fort unharmed and victorious. To celebrate, she decided to cook hamburgers for the whole family. The pan, full of burning hot oil, somehow slipped from her hands in such a way that all the oil spilled on her arm. An ambulance had to be called, and she needed skin grafts. My personal theory is that the universe got mad when she tried to fight back and turned the April 1st curse up to 11. Story 5. The worst person in the world lived near the DMV. I avoided the whole neighborhood at all costs in case I ran into him. One day I had to go to the DMV for an appointment, and I woke up that day dreading the thought that I might run into him. It sounds ridiculous. It was a work day, early afternoon. The odds were high that he was at work. And even if he wasn't, he probably wasn't hanging out at the DMV. We lived in a major city with about 1 million people in it. Nevertheless, I was paranoid when I was making my way over to the DMV, paranoid when I ate lunch at the restaurant next door, what if he came in for lunch, and paranoid during when I was waiting in line, and paranoid when I was walking out afterwards. It wasn't until I traveled all the way across the city and made it to my downtown office that I exhaled. I laughed at myself. What a silly bit of scaredy cat paranoia. I made my way through the rest of the workday, rolling my eyes at myself until it was time to leave for the gym, at which point I stepped outside, and guess who just happened to be walking down the sidewalk directly in front of my office at that moment. Story 20. Cut off contact with a horrible ex around May of this year, and last week I finally decided to clear all of her crap out of my car. Some clothes and random junk, got it all bagged up and tossed out. The very next day, I turned a corner at the store, and there she was. I haven't seen or spoken to her in 6 months, and the day after I try to remove items that remind me of her, I almost run right into her. My ex dumped me in April this year. It was really rough for me, and it took a while to feel somewhat happy again by myself. I was doing counseling, and the day after my last session, when I had expressed finally feeling in a good spot, I got a surprise text from her. And then 3 weeks ago, I was in the shopping center with my new girlfriend, who is so much better, and lo and behold, I saw her working, which I've not done since we split up. Story 30. I took German in high school. Had a good teacher, went up to level 3, and she started assigning German books for me to read. One was called Momo, a small fiction novel. Some students had read it before, apparently, and there were a few underlined words and comments. Couple years later, I was tutoring German and thought to email her about useful materials. Turns out she had passed away suddenly from cancer right after I finished her classes. I ended up browsing thrift stores to find materials and happened to see a copy of Momo on the shelf. Brought it home, started reading, and there were underlined words and comments in the margins. It was the same book. I guess it's not too much of a coincidence. She lived in the area and not many people would buy German books, but damn. Story 51. It was over the course of a year and a half. While I was student teaching in a really intensive program, my son was born prematurely, then died a month later. I was lucky to find a job because it was peak recession, and at the least in my state, districts were broke. Then I lost my job that I had worked myself ragged for on the 1-year anniversary of my son's death. A few months later, we learned that our other son had the same condition that killed our first son. Like getting struck by lightning twice, said the doc. 5th known case of it repeating in the world. When we called my father-in-law to tell him, we learned he had stage 4 lung cancer. Then we got treatment for our second son, and it was successful. But then the stent failed a week later, and we lived in a hospital for 2 months until he passed. It's been 8 years, and I'm still kinda raw. Waiters, what's the most ridiculous order someone's placed, and how did you deal with it? Story 1. I worked at a restaurant/fish market type of establishment where we sold raw products but would also prepare the food on the spot. One day I was helping an old Asian lady out, and she told me had never had a whole lobster and would love to try one. As she was shopping in the fish market portion, I assumed she wanted it live. So we went over to the lobster tank and she picked the happiest little lobster out there. I asked her if she wanted to pay $16.99 for it alive or $22.99 for us to cook and serve it to her. She decided to take it alive, and I took some time to weigh it out and wrap it up in a take-up box for her to take home. I put it down on the table and walked away. A minute or two later, I hear a commotion and come out to see this little Asian lady with a knife trying to cut off the claw of the lobster. Apparently, she thought she was supposed to eat this thing live. I cooked it for her. Edit. I'm aware that lobster sashimi is a popular dish, but typically in that scenario, the lobster is freshly killed and the meat is presented to the consumer uncooked. This lady was not eating it sashimi style, but rather trying to fight with a lobster in order to eat it. She clearly had no idea what she was doing. Oh my god, for some reason I think that absolutely adorable. A cute little old Asian lady trying to fight a lobster. Don't ask me how it got the gun, just run! Story 2. Not a waiter, but a cook. Had a lady order her tofu scramble burnt, so I cooked it hard. She sent it back because it wasn't burnt enough, so I cooked it harder. She sent it back again, and the waiter said she really wants it burnt. So I got a wok super hot, put too much oil in, and proceeded to burn the crap out of it. The chef came by and lost his crap. I explained it to him, and he watched me burn just to ruin the thing. It was black and smelled like a tire fire. She ate all of it and said we were the only place to get it right. She came back every weekend for it, and we had to train new cooks how to burn the living F out of her food for her. I still can't comprehend why she would eat that. I had a customer send back well done prime rib 3 times because it wasn't well done enough. The cook said F it the 4th time and dropped it in the deep fryer for at least 5 minutes. Then the customer asked for a side of ketchup. As terrible as that is, I've cooked for so long that sort of crap doesn't even bother me anymore. People like what they like, and it's doubtful they're gonna change. It's when they're petulant demanding buttholes about it that gets me. I'm all for people liking what they like, but also, when you're a good cook, it hurts for someone to be like, no, I want you to forget your artistry, your skills, and I want you to cook this like someone who has never seen a stove before. Story 3. One couple in particular made the chef rage so hard, she just walked out. Wife orders some meals and makes a ton of changes to it. She gets the plate, takes one bite, and sends it back because she doesn't like it. Husband orders a $60 lobster plate. The lobster tail comes with pepper sprinkled on top. The husband sends it back and wants a whole new one with no pepper on top. Apparently his wife wanted to try one piece but doesn't like pepper. I would love to be in a restaurant where a waiter or manager tells a persnickety customer that the chef has left the building because of their order, and there will be no more food. I've seen that happen. The manager came over to the table next to mine just as we were being seated and politely said, "Sir, ma'am, I'll have to ask you to leave the premises immediately. The chef has refused to prepare your order and the waiter refuses to return to this section until you're gone. The drinks you've already had are gratis, of course." They sat there in shock. After a moment, the guy said, "Well, I'm not leaving." The manager's tone changed and said, "Sir, if you're not out the door in the time it takes me to walk to the phone over there, I'll be calling the police." He then walked to the phone and the couple left without another word. It still bugs me that I missed what actually Story 4. I worked at a coffee shop and a girl ordered hot cocoa. We have milk, dark, or white chocolate, so I asked her which she would like. It was a very standard question that we asked everyone. Then this happened. None of those, I just want Oreos on top. Girl. Do you just want warm milk with whipped cream and Oreos? Me. Disgusted look and tons of sass. No, I want hot chocolate with whipped cream and Oreos on top. Girl. Okay, great. So for us to make hot chocolate, we melt these little chocolate chips into milk. We have milk chocolate, dark chocolate, and white chocolate chips. Which would you like us to use? Me. No, you don't get it. I want hot chocolate with whipped cream and Oreos on top. I don't want those chocolate chips. Girl. I just gave up trying and used milk chocolate. She was at least 15 too. Seriously, kid? Ugh. Story 5. I worked at a national pizza chain for a while as a manager. We used to get this guy who would order all the time. He was lactose intolerant, so couldn't have cheese, and had severe heartburn when he ate red sauce. He would order an extra large Supreme with no sauce and no cheese. I told the guy if I did that, the toppings would just fly all over the box, but he didn't care. We ended up just baking the dough separate from the toppings and put the toppings in a small wing box on the side for him. Guy said no other pizza place would do that for him, and he turned out to be a great repeat customer who always tipped well. I will say one thing about the picky pizza people. You get it right for them, you become their new best friend, and it kind of feels good. Pizza is a special art, a beautiful thing that can be made in so very many ways. So many toppings, crust types, sauces, cheeses. There are a plethora of things that are a pizza. What this man ordered is not a pizza. It's flatbread and toppings, and that's totally fine, but it isn't pizza. Story 9. I had a 4-top once when one of the gentlemen was ordering and asked for extra onion, and he made extreme emphasis on extra onion. So I put the order in and have to talk to the chef to make sure he understands extra onion. So when the order comes out, I get a side plate of cut whole onion. I giggle and take the order to the table. I put the orders of food in front of all the guests and left the onion man for last. I set his plate of food and extra onion down, and he looks up at me and starts laughing. The whole table is now laughing. I'm like, the F? Apparently, wherever they go, no matter what, he always asks for more onion, and this time, Mr. Snarky Chef nailed it. Story 11. It wasn't so much the order that was disturbing, but the post-order request. He asked me to chew up the food and put it back onto his plate. No medical reason, no missing teeth, not old, just creepy as F. He got very upset when I declined. You win. Weirdest request ever awarded is yours, hands down. All I can think of is some bizarre intercourse thing. Are you a woman? I am. I assumed it was some type of kink. Are you a wanted criminal or a suspect in an unsolved mystery? Maybe he was trying to scam a DNA sample from you. Pretty crafty if you ask me. I want you to chew the food for me and spit it on the plate. I don't think I can do that. Please, my food, chew it up for me. I really can't, call me Bird, Baby Bird. What's your favorite no effing way story? Story 1. One winter I went sledding down a popular hill in my home with my brother and his wife. At the bottom of the hill there's a frozen pond. My sister-in-law hops on the back of my sled, sitting in the back, and we went down together. Due to the extra mass, we started going way faster than I had expected when I noticed we were heading right toward a little kid. I just couldn't maneuver out of the way, so I leaned forward and scooped the kid up, holding him like Simba. Then I realized we were about to sled into a frozen pond, so I bailed out and held the kid as high over my head as I could. I stood up, set the kid down, and looked around for his parents. When I saw a big dude coming at me, I was like, oh crap, here we go. Then he got closer, and I realized it was one of my closest friends, and that the kid I ran into was his son, who I babysat regularly. I thought to myself, no effing way, and gave him a big hug. The kid said he thought it was awesome. Story 2. I worked at a small restaurant on the north shore of Lake Superior the summer of my junior year in college. The woman who owned it was an ultra-conservative fundamentalist Christian. They sold plots of land to people for Y2K. After a full summer of craziness, I had enough and wanted to go on a trip. My brother and I and a friend decided to go see the Grand Canyon, so I told the owner that I had to work on a paper for Bible school and would like to leave a couple weeks early. She was reluctant, but in the end sent me off with her blessing because I was doing the Lord's work. So we head out on a road trip to the Grand Canyon, never bothering to look on a map as to where it actually was. We ended up somewhere out west at a place called the Grand Canyon that looked totally unimpressive. So we headed up to Glacier National Park as an alternative. We pulled into a gas station near Glacier, and who the F do I see but the owner that I lied to and her entire family that I'd gotten to know throughout the summer. I ducked down in the car while my brother walked by them and looked at me with this "what the F" expression on his face. We tore out of there and I never saw them again. What are the odds? I would say the odds are pretty much exactly 1 in a million, and Pratchett fans know that means it is pretty much a certainty. Also, hell yeah, North Shore! As someone from that area, I will always be excited to hear mention of it. Story 3. This happened back in my undergrad days on the day of an econ midterm. Because the lecture hall is so large and the class has about 300 students, the professor needs a microphone in order to speak to the class. So he's in front of the class giving his whole speech about the exam, 50 questions, multiple choice, make sure to write your name on the Scantron, turn it in up here when you're done, etc. Finally, he bids us all good luck and leaves the lecture hall into his office, which is in the adjacent room. Well, he didn't realize that he left his microphone on, so while the entire class was dead silent during this exam, we all listened to the events that unfolded inside his office. We hear a brief, muffled conversation he is having with the female TA of our class. Then the conversation stops and it becomes painfully evident that they are doing it. The quieted moans of the TA are magnified on the speakers in the lecture hall. The entire class remains dead silent. No one wants to be the first to make some kind of move. Finally, the professor yells loudly, "Oh, F!" and the microphone abruptly shuts off. 20 minutes later, the professor walks out into the lecture hall as if nothing happened. He was fired a week later. Story 4. I'm positive this will get buried, but I like telling this anyway. While visiting family in Michigan for our family reunion a few years ago, I live in California, there was a KKK rally in the small town that we were staying in. Being a young black teenager semi-flipping crap that there's an actual white supremacist rally going on, I decide to hole up in the grocery store where, coincidentally, 6 other black people, most likely everyone of color in the town, were camping out as well. I made eye contact with a guy that looked nearly exactly like me, just slightly older. He claimed to be driving through the town because he's on a road trip with his friends from Hialeah, Florida. I told him I was born there and then adopted and moved to California. He was immediately curious about the implications of how this happened, and I told him my biological mother's name and that she was too young to take care of me, so she had me adopted. After he hears this, he pulls out a picture of his mother at her high school prom. I reach for my wallet, numb with incredulity as my fingers pull free the same exact picture of this young woman. We have the same mom. We're long-lost brothers. Story 5. A few years ago, I made plans to go see 9 Inch Nails in Massachusetts on their final tour with a friend of mine along with his 2 friends. We're from New York. On the trip, the MIA, the song Paper Planes comes on, and the 3 of us start singing along, making all the noises obnoxiously, which annoys the 4th guy, Shane. He tells us that he hates the song, which ended up being a bad idea because my friend found and purchased the single for that song, complete with 5 remixes, later that day. We headed into town a couple days early, so there was plenty of annoying Shane with the song, along with making jokes about how maybe if we ask nicely, Trent Reznor will play it at the concert. The day of the concert comes, and as the opening act, Street Sweeper Social Club, plays their set, the singer announces, "This next song isn't on our album," and launches into a cover of, you guessed it, Paper Planes. It took a few moments to sink in because I really couldn't believe that it was actually happening. It was too perfect. Here we had been annoying him obnoxiously for the entire trip with this song, which the rest of us genuinely liked for the record, only to have the opening act of the concert play it out of nowhere. Look, Shane, I get that the first couple seconds of the song are a little meh with the guitar just going dun 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 dun. But after that, the song slaps. Am I saying that right? Look, Paper Planes is great. End of discussion. Story 6. My oldest and dearest friend and I met when we were infants. We literally shared a crib together. Our parents have told us hundreds of stories about the things we used to do when we were kids, and we talked to each other about 3 months. I don't even remember not knowing her. She's 23 now, and I'm not too far behind her. She went to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I went to Michigan State University in East Lansing. About 3 years ago, I randomly went to Ann Arbor with some friends and was trying to find her to catch up and see her new place. As I was walking and talking to her on the phone, she mentioned she lives on Ann Street. I joke with her and say, I live on Ann Street, what a coincidence. We should have breakfast in the morning since we live down the street. Her, funny jackbutt, just get here, the address is 517. Me, wait, your address is 517 Ann Street? Her, yes. Me, my address is 517 Ann Street. I got to her place and realized that not only do we have the exact same address in different cities, but our crossroads are the same too. She lives on the corner of Ann and Division. I live on the corner of Ann and Division. What kind of strange/spot-on numerology is that? Story 9. Here's mine. I was walking my older dog one night around 10 p.m. I had him off leash since it was late and we were in a neighborhood. No one to bother. I kept track of him for poo duty as he sniffed around and we were approaching an intersection. The house we were walking along was 20 feet from the sidewalk where I was and was edging by very large juniper bushes which he was checking out. Suddenly he stopped and dove into a bush. This was odd considering he was nearly 10 years old and although he's active, he's not crazy like that. Note, lab husky mix for reference. Out of the bush comes some sort of snarl/scream and all I could think was, crap, he got a raccoon. And out leaps an immature mountain lion, at least 20% larger than my dog. It runs off down the road and I stand there terrified yelling, no effing way, as he comes back to me wagging butt like he's the greatest dog ever, which is very likely considering that cat was much bigger than me. It was probably his most well-earned rawhide bone he's ever earned. Story 13. My friend John is a paramedic and firefighter. He also teaches and certifies first aid/CPR. Now, for those that don't know, CPR is not very effective. It has a very low success rate unless initiated soon after an incident, which is why everyone should learn CPR. Even after revival, many people still have serious health effects. One day, John gets into a pretty bad car accident and goes into cardiac arrest. The paramedics and police are dispatched. The officer first on scene knows CPR and initiates chest compression on John. John is revived and although suffered severe memory loss, is well. The kicker? John taught the officer CPR the week prior to the incident. Honestly, what a fun thing to bring up in class. The reason I am teaching you all CPR right now is because one day you might use it to save my life, because that exact thing happened. Yep, my motivations are selfish, but hey, CPR works. Story 23. Was at a Donald Glover stand-up show a couple weeks ago at RIT. During his routine, he switches to a Q&A bit where he started talking directly with the audience. As he asks us what we want to talk about later in the show, some girl screams out, "Battle me!" Turns out she was a poet who had won a freestyling competition for free tickets to Donald Glover, and she wanted to freestyle battle him. So what does he do? He calls her up on stage. Then he says that we need someone to give a beat. So he calls out for a beatboxer and brings someone else up from the crowd. Finally, since he's participating in the battle, he cannot run it, so out from backstage comes his Derek comedy partner DC Pearson, who was the opening act, to MC the event and set the rules for the freestyle battle. They then proceeded to do a 3-round wrap-off. Story 24. I wouldn't call it my favorite because it is just off the top of my head, but it is the only thing I can think of at the moment. Last week, I was hanging around outside one of the buildings on campus between classes, and I saw some guy come out of the doors who looked extremely similar to one of my TAs last year. I thought to myself, holy crap, that looks so-and-so. But I knew it wasn't him. But the fact that it looked like the TA made me think back on that class I had last year for a few moments. Literally 30 seconds after the lookalike walks out the door, the actual TA comes out of the door. It was very strange, almost like being reminded and subsequently thinking about the person who had summoned them. Story 30. I went out cruising with a friend of mine and his friends. It was late, probably around 1 a.m. or so, and we were cruising down Main Street. Up ahead, the traffic came to almost a crawl. This is weird since it's late at night. We could see up ahead that there were 3 Ford Focuses all lined up and purposefully slowing traffic. My friend's older brother who was driving hops in the median and guns it up to the Focus. We see that it's a bunch of kids getting their rocks off doing butthole-ish things. The driver says, "Oh, F no." He turns to his friend and says, "You know what to do." He speeds ahead of the 3 Focuses and pulls up on the side of the street. My friend grabs a cordless drill from the back of the Suburban, the vehicle we were in, jumps out of the vehicle, and takes off the license plate. The Focuses were past us at this point, still going slow to pee off the people behind them. My friend gets back in the suburbs and we take off. The driver speeds up to the Focus, gets in the median next to the far left Focus, flips them off, then crashes his Suburban into the Focus, which in turn crashes into the other Focuses. At this point, I am like, what the F just happened? We watch for a minute as we watch these kids trying to get over their airbags and start assessing the damage. Everyone in the vehicle is busting up laughing and we take off flying down Main Street. When we get back to my friend's house, he puts the license plate back on and popped a dent out of the Suburban. Hospital workers, what was the dumbest thing you saw a patient do immediately after leaving? Story 1. I feel like I am that person. When I was 15, I broke my arm, went to the hospital, got a cast, went about for a few weeks and got it removed. Great, I have my arm back. Now, I wasn't the brightest kid and needed everything explained to me. No one told me not to have an arm wrestle with my fresh out of cast arm. No one explained it was still healing. 4 hours after having my cast removed, I was back in A&E and getting a new x-ray and then a new cast put on by the same nurse who just took it off. I have never seen such disappointment in the eyes of someone who wasn't my mother. Story 4. Somebody lit up a cigarette in a no-smoking area with a nasal cannula on and lit their face on fire. Had to come right back into the ER. I used to work home health and I'd walk into these houses where it's obvious someone has been smoking, and they deny anyone, including themselves, are smoking. They smell like they just finished one right before I walked in. Anyway, I don't give a crap if people with COPD want to keep smoking. It's their life, so you don't need to lie to me, but I just don't want them to die in a fire where their face is ground zero. If you're lying to me about the situation, it's harder for me to give you the education that keeps you safe. Don't smoke with your oxygen on. I'll never understand folks lying to their doctors and medical staff. Like, folks, these people gotta keep secrets, and sometimes have your life in their hands. If you lie to them, you're putting yourself at risk for nothing. Story 5. Not a hospital worker, but when I was 5, I was visiting my grandpa in the hospital, and when we left, I was walking backwards talking to my mom. I turned around and smacked my head against a parking sign. Had to immediately go back into the hospital to ask for some ice. I imagine the nurse watching got a laugh out of that one. My mom sure did. I know someone who fell and broke the bone above the eye by hitting the door handle. When her mother and brother were visiting her in the hospital, she shared the entire experience in great detail, which led to her brother feeling uneasy. He tried to leave the room but fainted, hit the door handle, and broke the bone above the eye. Story 10. I had a patient leave AMA one night at 2 a.m. He said he was walking home. He signed the papers and left. I was busy, so I didn't get around to the computer documentation and discharging from the system. About 2 discharging hours later, the ER called the floor and asked if we had a patient by a certain name. I told her he had left AMA. Turns out he walked a few blocks and realized he couldn't go on and called an ambulance. Since he was never officially discharged, he just came back to the floor and went back to bed. Leaving against medical advice is just such a bad idea, folks. But I also know the cost of healthcare in certain countries makes the idea of staying in the hospital financially terrifying. So I guess what I'm saying is really talk it through with your doctor and weigh your options, folks. Story 18. Patient came in for shortness of breath. She was seen and discharged. A nurse saw her walk into the parking lot, jab herself in the leg with an EpiPen, and come right back in saying that she's short of breath. That's not dumb, that's a mentally ill patient. Story 21. We had a guy leave AMA against medical advisory and then get hit by a bus. Right, the guy totally left the hospital of his own volition and got hit by a bus. Story 24. Now retired, but one of the things I liked about my hospital was the food. We have a lot of immigrants in our area, and some wise person decided to hire a pretty diverse crowd of cooks. Jamaican ladies making spicy chicken, Japanese cooks making sushi, Mexican dudes making made-to-order burritos, local barbecue, etc. And it was all very clean from a nutritional viewpoint. All of it was inspected by our RDs. And just about every day I would see patients turn down this excellent food and have their families bring them crap from fast food joints in town. Story 26. I am in IT and was working an overnight shift in the emergency room supporting a new software rollout. A dude was brought in because he had drunkenly stumbled out in front of a car and got hit. When my shift ended around 11 a.m., I went to a little Irish pub down the street to have a beer and some lunch before I headed home to get some sleep. And lo and behold, guys who are in there drinking again. Yep, the same dude from the ER was already drinking whiskey again just hours after being released from the hospital with a broken arm and a few other injuries. Story 31. Didn't actually see this, but the story was confirmed by the patient's wife. Guy was diagnosed with appendicitis at a small rural hospital which needed to transfer him to get the surgery. He refused ambulance transfer and decided he would just drive himself to the bigger hospital. He was told not to eat anything, so of course he gets McDonald's en route, then lies about when he last ate. As the anesthesiologist was intubating him for surgery, he vomited Mickey D's into his airway, aspirated it, and ended up with aspiration pneumonia. He never came off the vent, died about a week later from his pneumonia. Hope his last meal was the best Big Mac ever. Idiot. Workers, what is your best, well, I'm getting fired moment at work? What were the consequences? Story 1. Working as an executive assistant to a VP, and she asks me to go online and pay a speeding ticket that her son, a grown man I'll have you know, got. Now her son is notorious for getting speeding tickets, and then she pays a lawyer to contest them because if he pleaded guilty and she paid them all, they would take away his license. I go online and am not paying attention, so instead of clicking just the one ticket to pay, I select all, about 4 or 5 of them, and proceed to pay them. The minute the transaction was approved, I realized my mistake and started to panic. I find the contact number and call them in my panic mode and beg them to reverse the payment, explain my situation, and told them I was going to get fired over this. 0 Fs were given. I now have to go in and tell my boss that not only did I just charge about $1,500 to her credit card, but I can't reverse it, and her son is probably going to lose his license because of it. She was not amused, but I didn't get fired. I did, however, cost her an additional $1,000 or so in lawyer fees to have them fix my F-up, and she hasn't asked me to pay another one of his tickets since. Story 2. I work at a major electronic retail store in Canada. It was the day of the Xbox One release day. We only received a limited amount of consoles as expected. There is no room for an infinite amount of consoles. So a guy came in at night and was looking around the store and whatnot. I asked him if he needed any help, and he just kind of snubbed me off. So I let him be. A few minutes later, he came back up to me and asked me very rudely if we have any more of the consoles left. So I told him that we were sold out and we can put his name down on a waiting list. So he proceeds to tell me how much of a worthless bag of crap I am because I don't have any Xboxes for him, and he came all the way just to get one and I can't help him. So he ended up buying some games, which I ran through for him. I asked him if he wanted a bag. He said, "A bag? Why the F would I want a bag? Just give me the games." So I gave it to him and said, "Have a nice day and go F yourself." Manager overheard me and pulled me into his office. I explained what happened, he laughed, high-fived me, and said he would have done the same thing. See, now that's a cool manager. If a customer is a D-bag, they should get treated like a D-bag. I've had enough of rude people in stores getting away with everything because heaven forbid there be even the most minor of consequences to their actions. Story 3. I found a hurt owl on my way to work. I was stunned, so I was able to pick it up. Another car stopped too when they saw what I was doing and gave me a trash bag. I put the owl in the trash bag and put it in the trunk of my car. I called Raptor Rescue and told them about the owl and said I could bring it after work, but they said I should keep an eye on it in case it takes a turn for the worst. So I had no choice but to bring the owl into my office. I transferred it to a printer box. One time when I went to check on it, it had recovered and flew around the entire floor of my office. It was amazing because its wingspan was nearly 5 feet and people could see its shadow move across their desk as it flew. It promptly crapped on my friend's file cabinet and landed on his cube wall. I ran to get it, but it flew away again and did another lap around the floor. Finally, I was able to grab the bird and place it back in the box. The VP was, to say the least, not pleased. I thought for sure that that was my last day at the company. No one ever said a word to me. But from that day forward, I quit bringing any wild or tame, used to bring my dog into work before his grooming appointments, animal into work. At that year's Christmas party, they sang the 12 Days of Christmas with the chorus, "And an owl flying in distress." Story 4. This was many years ago, working tech support/sales for an up-and-coming GoDaddy.com. I'm on a call with a customer who needs to reset her password. Since it's very difficult to turn a password reset call into a sale, we were required to wrap them up in under 10 minutes. This woman is awful, doesn't follow directions, and is completely computer illiterate. 30 minutes into the call, I'm still trying to explain the concept of highlighting text with her mouse, and my supervisor comes over and asks what the hell is taking so long. Frustrated and aggravated, I mash the mute button, and once the light turns red, I turn to him and say, "Sorry, this lady is a effing idiot." There's a brief moment of silence. I recall my supervisor's face morphing into a grin of understanding when suddenly I hear in my headset, "What?" Scumbag mute button. Worst part is, if I just called her an idiot without the adjective, I would have gotten off with a warning. There's a strict no swearing policy on the phone floor that no one, even the managers, followed. However, in the rare and unlikely case a customer heard you curse, you were fired without question. I mean, at that point, you know you're fired. Might as well just unload on that lady and get a little catharsis out of the whole situation. Story 5. 2 incidents. Boss had been rude to me for a while, and I wasn't over the last shift's abuse. Boss made an insulting comment about me loud enough so I would purposefully hear it. This is by far my biggest pet peeve. I went up to him, gave him my hat, and yelled, "I am sick of your crap." This was in front of all the employees. He responded, "Fine, go." I think I would have been fired/quit if I didn't immediately respond with, "Give me his boss's number." His mood changes quickly, and I ended up getting a raise. I would not suggest this tactic. Second incident was having a massive nosebleed. Took some generic medicine that I didn't recognize to deal with my constant coughing. Apparently, it had cleared up my sinuses that were infected. You know when you're biting into an onion ring and the whole onion strip decides to all fall out at once? You get all the onion on your chin. Imagine that only with nose blood. Also, instead of my chin, it was the customer's food in front of the customer. Story 6. I work in tech support for my university school of engineering. It was late and I was in the labs doing homework with people. After I finished, I was just wandering the halls because I was bored. One of my coworkers left his ID in a classroom. We use our IDs to unlock each classroom, so I had to let him in. Usually we only have to slide our wallet over this black box, and if our ID is in there, it will unlock. I decided that since my wallet is in my back pocket, all I'd have to do is put my butt up against the wall and the door would open. It was a little high, so I had to jump. I took a step, jumped up, spun around to scan my butt, and immediately put both feet through the drywall. I stuck the landing, made eye contact with the other employee, and walked away. I came back, slid a wet floor sign in front of the holes I made, and put a work order to have them filled. They were filled, and nobody besides me and that coworker ever knew I did it. Story 7. I worked for a privately owned restaurant/deli. The owners were married and terrible people. I would get a phone call and be demanded to work in the next few hours on threat of being fired if I quit. Anyways, one day I got in a big deal of trouble for giving a customer double meat without charging him. Now, I don't mean talking in the back office. I mean full-on being screamed at in front of customers. Anyway, after I back-talked, I was let go in front of a line of prospective buyers. As I walked out of the store, I looked over my shoulder and proudly said to my bosses, "Pooped in the cookie dough." This was a lie, but they didn't know it. We had a huge vat of it in the back. Our cookies were very popular, so it was a big deal to them. My coworker eventually told me, and the husband and wife devil duo looked through the dough and couldn't tell what was chocolate chip and what was my poop, even though I never actually did it. They threw out the whole vat, $500 to $1,000. Felt good. Edit. On threat of being fired if I didn't show up. I don't know how I got there. I mean, that's a pretty good way to get them, though thank heavens they didn't try to, charge you with anything for doing that. But I mean, even if they did, sounds like it was worth it. Story 8. I worked at a call center and was joking around with a friend of mine. She had just engaged in a relationship with another girl and was complaining that the intercourse wasn't very good, making jokes and saying that she wanted to play with her new girlfriend's butt, but her girlfriend was having none of it. Off mute, without missing a beat, I just looked at my friend and said, "So you like butt play, do ya?" And then, slowly, quietly, I hear the customer's voice. "You're off mute, just so you know." I went pale. As soon as the call was done, I approached my supervisor, who was and still is cool as hell. I've left there, but we still play games together all the time, and gave him a heads up in case a manager approaches him about it. Thankfully, it looks like the call went by unnoticed, in a time where we were having 20 to 25 calls a week listened to, and I only took about 10 a day. And I wasn't fired. Story 9. I worked at an automotive parts manufacturing factory while going to art college, and part of my job was boxing up parts and attaching a tag onto the box with thin wire. But for every box I completed, one every couple hours, I sculpted a little animal out of the wire with needle-nose pliers. I gave the little sculptures, bears, rabbits, whatever, to random employees which they left on their workstation. One day I was making one of the little sculptures. I looked over my right shoulder to see my supervisor standing directly behind me just watching me with a clipboard. I paused, looked her dead in the eye, held out the sculpture and said, "Want a bear?" She fired me on the spot. I'm not an animator at Disney. Story 12. In high school, I worked at an AM radio station in my small town on Sunday mornings. I was the only person there from 6 a.m. to noon. It was mostly reading the weather and playing pre-taped programs. At one point, I played a live broadcast of a Catholic Mass going on. During that time, I would crawl into a ball in the break room couch and doze off, hungover from the night before. One Sunday, I woke up to Hawkeye 1200, you can't sleep on the job. I sit up and see the boss who runs the station standing over me with a frown. But I wasn't sleeping, I say. Just when I think he might buy it, he says, "You have an alarm clock next to you." Oh yeah, I brought in an alarm clock that I'd set so I didn't oversleep. Hard to explain that one. I thought I was screwed, but somehow he didn't fire me. I worked there another month and then left for college. Story 15. I use Adium to manage my IMs when I'm at work. I'm a developer. I was speaking to a project manager at a new job. I'd been there for maybe a month. She was asking me to do some tedious work that was completely unnecessary because they promised it to a client. While frustrated, I tabbed over to my girlfriend's IM to complain how frustrated I was that they were making us do all this work for basically nothing. Unfortunately, I didn't tab over. I sent the IM to the PM. My heart sank into my stomach. Saw the little icon that showed she was typing and was like, oh crap, how do I cover this up before she responds? I reread the comment and noticed I used a lot of pronouns, so when she responded, she thought I was talking to her about the client. Dear Lord, I thought I'd ruined my awesome new job right after it started. Story 19. I'm a medical equipment repair technician. One night I was working on an exam light that was hanging from the ceiling in an operating room. I had a bit of it apart and was inspecting the connection between the big light head and the arm that it was suspended from when a clip popped out. The light head dropped to the floor. The arm is spring-loaded and it shot up and shattered the ceiling and 5 or 6 lights showering the operating table, anesthesia cart, and myself in ceiling tile, plastic, and glass. At first I was in shock and what just happened didn't register in my brain. I reached down to pick up the light head, which is about 3 foot across, and grabbed the arm with my other hand. While trying to put them back together, I realized I'm coating everything in blood. The OR staff came running in and just saw me surrounded by destruction and covered in my own blood. Fortunately, the charge nurse had a sense of humor. I mean, if there's any place to get hurt like that, it's in a hospital. Also, I doubt they would have ever wanted to fire you because otherwise someone else would have had to deal with that mess. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 20. I once was chatting with a higher-up manager about how a lot of people were away on the holidays. She said she may leave early but was stuck pulling a couple extra hours with all the people out getting their stuff handled. As she was walking away, what I wanted to say was, yeah, I don't want to have anyone working harder at their job than they have at this time of year. Or something like that. What came out of my mouth was, yeah, I don't want to have to make you do your job. She was already around a corner by this time I got that far, so my brain made me stop talking. Then I realized what I just said, but it was too late. She was already gone. I heard about it quite a bit from my direct supervisor later, but nothing came of it. Story 24. I worked as a media buyer, and on my 3rd day on the job, my boss asked me to find some information and update the huge spreadsheet he was working on for the client's annual plan. As I was about to update it, he opened the file to finish a few things and asked me to wait. Now, I'm the new girl wanting to show service. I decide to open a copy of the spreadsheet and update it there, so when he finishes, I know where it goes. He finishes, lets me know I can open the file, I just get mine updated and save on top of his work. I basically made him lose his entire day of work. The year-round spreadsheet was ready, and the one I had was a rough draw. I really thought he was going to throw his monitor on my head. He changed colors and had to leave the office in order not to curse me. I apologized the next day, so did he, and we agreed to always save versions from that day on. Story 32. When I was younger, I worked at a small pet shop on the Central Coast. We sold mainly saltwater and some freshwater fish. Also, we sold pre-mixed saltwater to customers that didn't have time to make their own. One of my tasks was to make sure the betta bowls got cleaned and the water was changed. We kept a bunch of blue jugs in the back room that were always used for water changes. They were usually filled with fresh water so we could top off the fish tanks. So I go about my day like usual and start cleaning the bowls. We had about 40 bettas in stock at the time. I cleaned the bowls and replaced the water and moved on to help customers that started coming in. About an hour later, I come and find most of them belly up and half dead. Nobody told me that the blue jugs had salt water in them. My boss had filled them up a day before and forgot to tell everybody. I didn't get fired, but I did feel bad about the poor fish. From that day, I was known as the betta killer. Ugh, that wouldn't be so bad of a nickname, except it sounds like it should be the title of one of those alpha male podcasts. Welcome back to Betta Killer. On today's episode, I'll showcase a lack of understanding of biology and psychology that would embarrass a 5th grader, while my co-host will just mindlessly yes man in a pathetic attempt to latch on to what minuscule fame I've acquired among the dregs of the internet. Story 37. Here is my recent one, like yesterday, 2 days before my boss assigned me a task. I completed the task, replied all to her original email with saying, "Hey, here's my task, it is done." Apparently, I shouldn't have replied all. So instead of telling me that she added the head of the company in HR and told me never to send an email like that ever again and she only asked for my support, she is the lead on this project. Now keep in mind this task was simple, meaning tracking down clothing and marking on a document if they were in-house or had to be ordered from the warehouse. So flash forward to Thursday. I'm asking for a meeting to discuss this email. I'm confused. The HR woman is confused. She even came into my office and admitted that she read the email over and over and has no idea what I did wrong. Then, boom, I'm fired for my attitude. First time I've ever been fired in my whole life. I've never once gotten reprimanded or scolded in any job I have ever had. So drink one for me, Imgur. It's been a crappy week. The only silver lining is that someone quitted because I was fired, so I feel like Jerry Maguire. Where's my bag of fish? What? I've never seen Jerry Maguire, so I don't get what that was about. The rest of it sounds pretty par for the course. You did nothing wrong, but kind of made your boss look a little less good, so she canned ya. Sorry to hear about it, but that crap happens. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.